a lot of people seem to have hate towards these type of films. I guess you can call them black tragedies in some regard. They sometimes they're about slavery, sometimes they're about oppression, sometimes someone's been in prison, sometimes it's just the odds against people of our color. And I can understand in some regard how people say something to the idea of, I don't want to see us being beat up on again, or being beat down, or being killed in the streets, or being drugged, or having a dog sicked on us and everything. But I've always felt a bit different. My take has always been, if I wasn't there when everything was going on, then this is the medium by which I can at least understand and appreciate the struggle and the things that we have been put through, and the things that our ancestors have been put through. So I appreciate having that window into the past in that regard. And I even say to some people who mention things like that, if those people went through it, if they died, if they were killed, if they were beaten, if they were persecuted, and me at home in the comfort of my chair or in the movie theater has to just sit and suffer through watching it, and maybe shed some tears and go through it in that regard, that's a simple request to ask based upon all of the scores of our people who have had much harder obstacles to overcome or to be consumed by. So that's always been my take on it when I hear issues of people saying that they don't really want to sit down and listen to or watch something like this, or have to go through that set of feelings where they're mad against the world and they're enraged by everything that they see on the screen. That's always been the way that I felt about it. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I love the name of this film, Judas and the Black Messiah. This was a time around when J. Edgar Hoover was using COINTELPRO back in the day to kind of spy on people that we deem our leaders, to create intel on them, sometimes to lie on them, to get them wrongfully convicted and incarcerated, and to even have them killed. And so one thing that he said in the film was something to the effect of him referring to Chairman Fred Hampton as being a black messiah, and saying that he didn't want another black messiah after Martin Luther King Jr., who was by now assassinated, and also Malcolm X, who was also assassinated, to rise up again and, I guess, give us hope. And so one of the ways that he tried to end Fred Hampton's reign was to enlist the help of someone to infiltrate the Black Panther Party and to try to get as close to Fred Hampton as he could. Kev, to begin, just to give a quick overview, how did you feel about Judas and the Black Messiah?
I thought it was very well done. I appreciated the look into history, the look of just a few decades ago, because I'm familiar with some of the civil rights leaders, more so Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. than others. So this was very informative for me, because I heard about the raid on Fred Hampton's apartment. I heard about that, but this filled in some other things about it. I liked the different points of view of the people around Fred Hampton. I thought the actors were all fantastic.
Yes.
Down to their speech patterns, to how they dressed, to the emotions on their faces, all very real, all very believable. And of course, the music was perfect, fitting every time it came in. Every little sting, every little song that I know, every song my parents probably know.
Right.
Yeah, I really enjoyed and appreciated the film.
I felt the same way. One thing that I'll add to everything that you've said is the film's color palette was very interesting. It was like these soft reds and blues and greens and like golds that really added to that period of time that they were going for. For you all at home, real quick, I recommend that if you get a chance, you check out 2 or 3 quick things. The first would be Panther, the 1995 film by Mario Van Peebles. That is free actually on YouTube, so make sure you check that out. Another would be a documentary called The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. Right now, I believe that you could rent it on YouTube, and I think that you can also get it on Prime if you have like the premium deal or whatever. The third is a docuseries entitled Eyes on the Prize. And part 2 is where they go all into an interview with the real Bill O'Neal about everything that he was going through. And that interview is what kind of bookends this whole film. To go into the cast of characters, Kev, we're going to start with Lakeith Stanfield as Bill O'Neal. This is a 17-year-old, although I do believe that Lakeith may have played him to be a bit older than that, by the way of seeing him like smoke cigars and drink liquor and all, and be at the bar and things like that. But he still showed that youth that I believe that Bill had when he was at that age, that kind of wide-eyed, panicky at certain moments, not knowing who to trust, which I can totally understand, and just having that whole sense about itself. I believe that his motivation was, as I said, besides being a car thief, it seemed like he was all about money, but then he also, most importantly, was just trying to avoid jail. So he was kind of in a bit of a spider's web. The things that he was having to do to the Black Panthers and to Fred as a whole, I really don't think were things that he would have even thought about attempting had he not been cornered by the FBI and made to infiltrate them. How did you feel about Lakeith Stanfield as Wild Bill O'Neal?
I thought he was amazing. Lakeith Stanfield did a really good job of portraying that confliction on his face and in his body language, just looking concerned. And I was thinking of, how he portrayed how he portrayed the character he played in Get Out. I just thought of he's really, really good at showing you that he's really, really concerned. Because there were some other actors in the film that I felt, it's like, what is he thinking? But not with this one. So I thought he was perfect for the role.
I felt the same way. Early on, he was asked by the FBI agent who's interrogating him, why use a fake FBI badge instead of just a gun or a knife? And I like the answer that he gave, which was, back in the day, everybody had guns or knives. No one was afraid of anything like that. But you show a badge or you mention anything about FBI, and it's like you got the whole cavalry behind you. I really liked how he answered that question. Another big thing was, and has always been with Lakeith, he acts with his eyes. And I like the way several times in the movie, you'll note that when someone asked him a question that he wasn't sure of or that he didn't know the answer to, instead of answering it, he just stared at you. There was no shrugging or just saying the words, I don't know. Instead, it was almost like a look like he's looking through your soul. Like some ways it kind of seemed like, I can't believe you answered me this question. Other times it was like, if you think that I'm really going to answer that, you must be crazy. But I appreciated that being lent to Wild Bill O'Neal's role, because it's a role in which, just as Lakeith always does, sometimes it's more nonverbal with him. It's the way that he tilts his head. It's the way that he just gives a look where sometimes it looks like he's in the verge of tears. Other times it's how when it does come to the verbal side, how his voice can become shaky when it's times that things are kind of getting, intense. In my opinion, I believe that he was believable as a Black Panther. And I believe if you took the whole facade away, what he actually was just a boy who was pretending that he was dangerous when in fact he was actually harmless. Next, we're going to discuss Jake Plemons, who played Special Agent Roy Mitchell. I like to say if you looked up or if you Googled Matt Damon, I believe that the results would say not Jesse Plemons. How did you feel about Jesse's acting?
So Jesse Plemons first came on my radar when I saw Breaking Bad, because he's a pretty significant character towards the later seasons, and he's also in El Camino as well. I found him pretty reserved in this film. So I think that didn't work for me that well, but it may be that the agent that he was portraying is a pretty reserved kind of person, or that it may just be Jesse Plemons is reserved. My only issue. But I agree with what you were saying earlier about how, you can definitely tell what Lakeith Stanfield is thinking. He did, I think, the best in this movie of portraying what he's thinking. Maybe Plemons not so much, but I think it kind of worked as perhaps a foil to, I guess, the seriousness of what the Black Panther Party was going through. That Jesse Plemons as Agent Mitchell he was going to get his man, and yet Bill O'Neill had to live with the consequences of not only taking down or attempting to take down the Black Panther Party, but also taking down these people who he had grown to, it seems, love and respect, and also fight for the same cause.
Jesse Plemons was kind of a multifaceted take on the character, because he started off friendly, even inviting Bill O'Neill to his house and out to eat, dinner and things like that, which you normally wouldn't see with an informant and with the person that he's more or less checking back into. And there was one thing that he said in particular, and it was, I'm all for civil rights, but you can't cheat your way to equality, which I thought was a bit weird, and which added to it, he even compared the Black Panthers to the Ku Klux Klan. So, of course, coming from that side of the of the scope and the way that he was written, he was supposed to, I guess, turn his nose up to that cause. But I thought that it was really odd that you would actually compare the Panthers, who are feeding hungry children breakfast, over, I think they said like 300 children, who at the time were trying to open free clinics for the people in the community. So it's funny how sometimes the reality can be bent to benefit the person who is trying to get you to be pushed in a certain way. One thing, and I wonder if you felt the same, I really appreciated the scene where Plemons had to kind of spy on Bill O'Neill. And so it was during Chairman Fred's most iconic speech about "I am a revolutionary," in which just as Bill O'Neill is chanting with everybody else, he stops for a moment and looks out in the crowd, and you got Jesse Plemons with like a knit hat on, looking across at him with just these eyes. And I mean, I kind of froze at home watching the TV, so I know it would have been like, oh my gosh. And that's a scene that's actually in the trailer, so that just adds a bit more context to what was going on around that time. There are several films that also have tackled the role of undercover cops and how they can sometimes get into deep. One of them is Deep Cover, which was Larry or Lawrence Fishburne back in the day, and I think it also had Jeff Goldblum in it. Another one is Into Deep, which had Omar Epps and LL Cool J. My favorite, which is one that's in my top 10 of all time, is Donnie Brasco, with Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. And the last one, which was a bit more recent, is The Departed with Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson. So later on, I'll mention these films again just to provide some context. We're going to go to Martin Sheen. as J. Edgar Hoover. All I have to say about this is, if there's a such thing of losing yourself in a role, I believe that he was lost in the makeup. I think that they had my boy looking like Leatherface or something. How did you feel about Martin Sheen and his performance?
I agree. The makeup kind of threw me. I mean, I didn't recognize him. So when I didn't hear Hoover's name, I mean, if you know the story, you know it's Hoover's FBI that they're talking about. But when he came on, I didn't recognize him. I was like, who's that? And then I was like, well, I saw the eyes, I saw the cheeks. Okay, that's Martin Sheen, but what's up with the rest of his face?
Right.
So the makeup kind of threw me. And I'm not too sure what they were going for, because I'm not sure that Hoover looked like that. But well, they were going for something. I didn't pick up what they would put down. But it kind of threw me. It was kind of a small role, because I think it was less about Hoover than about the feds and the movement. So it was a small part, but yeah, the makeup, it didn't seem really either.
It's a little jarring, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of the FBI agents were kind of glossed over, but I guess their role wasn't as important as J. Edgar's and as Plemons' role. So I could kind of understand that. But seeing that they had the screen time that they did, I wonder if they could have been accentuated a bit better. But maybe it would have pulled away too much from the story. We are going to delve into Daniel Kaluuya as Chairman Fred Hampton.
Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
To prepare for this role, he gained weight, smoked cigarettes to the point that his voice got that kind of raspy texture to it, like the chairman's. He studied his cadence and also studied his speeches, as well as some of Malcolm X's and a couple of other things. As Bill O'Neill said somewhere in the film, Chairman Fred could sell salt to a slug. And so I'm wondering, did Daniel Kaluuya meet or exceed your expectations?
Daniel Kaluuya he's fantastic, and I believe he has found a way to fully inhabit whatever character he's playing. So yeah, I believed him as Fred Hampton. Yeah, he didn't sound like, I would say, like the last film that I've seen him in. Yeah, the mannerisms, the cadence to his voice, the intensity. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Top marks for me.
And from the first time that you saw him, just the way that he's kind of leaning with his head cocked to the side, and the way that he's wearing his hat, and you see in the real footage of Fred, that is the clothing that he wore and that speech, as well as the way that he moved. And so it's almost like he channeled him somehow. It's funny that just like Bill O'Neill was supposedly 17 around the time that the real events happened, Chairman Fred is actually 21 years old. And so he has his whole life ahead of him. And it's just a trip that, that things would happen in the way that they did. I thought that it was brilliant how there's a scene where he's listening to Malcolm X's speech, and he begins to speak as Malcolm speaks. And now Daniel Kaluuya being, from Britain, and having that, the inflections and the way that he talks already, and then having to take on Fred's speech patterns and cadence and the way that he paused and the way that he carried himself, and to also know how to imitate Malcolm X during his speech, I thought was just genius. And he did it just enough for you to know that not only did he know what he was doing, but he sounded just like the man. So it was mind-blowing. Also, you've got Queen and Slim, you've got Widows, you've got Black Panther, and you've got Get Out. But I honestly think that this is the role that Daniel has shown his whole repertoire, of talent, everything from A to Z. And I thought one final thing, that the fact of the real Fred and the fact of him, being, portrayed as wanting to bring all people together, everyone who was disenfranchised, regardless of color, regardless of your background, just so long as you were in some regard oppressed. As he put it, a rainbow coalition of people who were in need of their own freedom. So as COINTELPRO and as Hoover wanted to eradicate him, in truth, this was a person who was pulling everybody together, regardless of where they were from or whatever. And it would be times that he would go, like you saw, into neighborhoods where he might be 5 deep, just him and a couple of his boys or a couple of the women that would be with him, and being surrounded by the people who, like the gang members, and being able to go into them and connect with them almost immediately, to the point that it is growing and growing and the numbers are growing. And he would even say to you, as you're pulling up to the place that we're going to have this speech at, in front of all of these people, or when we're going to chat to them, hey, everybody in the car with me, give me your guns, so that it ain't no issue about anybody doing anything to start any sort of violence on our end. And I like the way that he conducted himself in that manner. We met this next person, this young lady, first. If you saw the film on Netflix, Project Power, it was a movie that kind of had a little bit of, I wouldn't say superhero themes, but it was a little bit in that regard. But it also had Jamie Foxx in it. Her name is Dominique Fishback, and she portrayed Deborah Johnson. First of all, I love the chemistry that she had with Fred, and the way that she approached him from the beginning, with just not being worried about how she would look, or if she came off wrong, or if she stuttered or whatever. She just wanted to approach him because it seemed like she fell in love with him from the first time she saw him, from the first time that she sat during one of the first speaking engagements that he had in the film. She was soft-spoken, very passionate. And if you remember the trailer, there's a little bit of a scene where she's speaking to Chairman Fred, and she's kicking some poetry to him about how she feels about him and the future that they have together and everything that's going on around at that time.
Like the masses, I was in awe when I first laid eyes on all the things you are.
And she really embodied that confidence and that strength that the real Deborah Johnson is said to have had back then and to still possess. How did you feel about Dominique Fishback as Deborah Johnson?
I thought she was very good. She was definitely like, a rock. She was soft-spoken, but she spoke strong. And then when you mentioned that, I also first saw her in Project Power, and she played a rapper in there. So I'm thinking, oh, is she gonna be doing this in every movie?
Right, and she was 14 years old.
Or poetry.
Right, she was supposed to be 14 years old in Project Power.
Right, so that was interesting. But she was very good in this movie. I didn't have any issues with what she was doing. You know what she felt. You know what she believed. You knew how strongly she believed in the cause, and also how much she loved Fred Hampton. You see all of that. So great job by her.
Great job. Another person to keep our eye on is Ashton Sanders. He starred in Moonlight. I used to catch him with my wife on a show on Hulu that is about the Wu-Tang Clan. There's also a film, I think, on Netflix called All Day and a Night. And the last one was he was in Equalizer 2, but he plays brother Conrad Jimmy Palmer. And right from the back, you know that he's militant. You know that he ain't taking no nonsense. He's got like the beret kind of cocked to the side at all times, so you can't really see his eyes. And he's quick to like buck if anything's going down. He's one of the first people that you want right beside you. one of the most fearless characters in the whole film, and I appreciated what Ashton Sanders brought to the role. How did you feel about him as Jimmy Palmer?
I like the portrayal. I didn't have any issues with it. I thought it was definitely appropriate. Also, speaking about that same intensity, he definitely had it, especially when he had a conversation with the police. So very, very good job.
Yeah, it was wild how, and for you all who have seen it, that the scene where he had to really stand up for two people who were being abused by the police was like, man, just the way that it went down. The things were happening so fast that you kind of had to wrap your mind around it and everything. Another character is the character actor Algie, I think it's Algie Smith. And he portrayed Conrad Jake Winters. Jake Winters in real life as well as in the film, not spoiling anything because this is all history. When he was killed, it set a lot of things into motion that not only led to new ideas and different perspectives from the party, but also in some ways led to the downfall because things got really intense around the time that that he was taken out. The first time I saw Algie Smith, I believe he played Ralph Tresvant of New Edition on a BET movie, which was amazing, by the way. And everything that I've seen him in since, he's been on point with it. Then we have one or two more of these iconic characters. We got a young lady named Dominique Thorne, and she portrayed Captain Judy Harmon. Yo, I was scared of Judy Harmon. I ain't got no problem saying it. I'm talking about she was supreme, just, as they say, ride or die. I mean, quick to pull a gun, quick to pull a knife. Somebody that you would definitely need in your corner. And so in between her and Jimmy Palmer, it's like you got your rook and your bishop are ready to just let loose if they needed to. But she also had a soft side. There's a scene in which she's speaking with Deborah Johnson about her wanting her to be protected because things were getting ready to jump off, and it really showed that she wasn't just all fire and ice. She really did have some more complexities to her role. So with her, and also with let me see, Lurel Howery, because he's also one that just popped up and made a cameo. Captain Judy Harmon was wow. Did you get the same feeling that I got whenever she was, raising her voice or kind of bucking or just, being just as raw and just as rugged as she was?
When you mentioned her character's name, I was going to say she scared me. She scared me. Don't mess with her.
Woo!
You're gonna lose something. So yeah, she hardcore. But we know that was true.
Yes. Yeah.
We know that the Panthers portrayed an image of strength. Power,
and especially the women.
Power mostly under control.
Right.
But out there when it needed to be, Dominique Thorne did that in this movie. So
yes,
great job.
Exactly. One last or two last kind of key players. Terrell Hill portrayed George Sams Jr. And for anyone who hasn't seen the film yet, I'll let you realize what role he had, and you can also look him up in history. But he's another one that if you Googled, in this case, Chris Brown, I believe that the search engine would say not Terrell Hill. Lurel Howery pulled a cameo, just one single scene, and it was such a trip because this was a reunion of the Get Out actors. The first time that the three of them, I would believe, have been together, since that film. And so I think his character's name was Wayne. And he just had a couple of lines and all, and he was like kind of like, this is no spoiler, but kind of like an FBI agent who was just sent to kind of look in on Bill O'Neill. But just in that one scene, it shows you just how many layers Lil Rel Howery has.
I heard that voice, and I'm like, I know that voice. Could it be?
Right.
And then but I wasn't sure, and then they finally, revealed this. It's like, it's Lil Rel, all right. No problems with that at all. I was glad to see him. I can't explain why, but I was glad to see him.
Yeah, it's just something about him,
what he was given. So A+ to that.
Exactly. To go into the pros of the film, and then we'll split things after with the cons. Is there anything in particular that stood out with you as moments that definitely met or exceeded your expectations as far as everything that was being told?
Well, like I was said, I really, really appreciated Lakeith Stanfield in all of this. We know it was centered around him. And I think he really brought to the forefront just how conflicted one can be if one is called on to rat out your friends.
Yes. Yeah.
I definitely believe that he was in an internal tug of war. He did that so well with how he reacted to people, like you said, acting with his eyes.
Right.
You find yourself, because there was like a few moments where he almost got caught. And then I found myself, staring at his face, like, how's he going to react once the heat is off? Once are these people going to believe his story? And what's he going to do right after? Right after they stop looking at him? That's what I found myself doing. I'm searching his face, because I'm like, I feel like I'm holding my breath, and I'm like, is he holding his breath too? So I think that was the thing that stood out for me.
And it was believable.
Well, they centered on his character, on Bill O'Neill, and the conflict he must have gone through, knowing that he had to be believable to his brothers in arms, and also deliver the intel that he needed to deliver to law enforcement, and how he had to hold both of those sides in him, and fulfill both of those sides, which were in conflict.
Ladies and gentlemen, watch when you checked out the film, or if you have already, watch Lakeith when things are drawing to a close as far as Fred Hampton's fate is concerned. I'll just put it that way. And how he almost reverts to appearing like a little boy in the situation, because by then, as I said, with his age in real life, although he plays him with a bit more maturity, the way that he looks and the way that he carries himself when the heat is really on and he has to make a decision is magical. Dominique Fishback, for me, just to jump on for a second, seemed like she represented hope and all the happenings of the film. The love that she showed, the fact that she was having Fred's child, which would in turn become Fred Hampton Jr., who is right now the chairman of the Cubs, which are the up and coming Black Panthers, and just the way that she brought that softness, but also that solid backbone that the Panthers needed. One big thing for me was the homecoming of Fred. There was an issue, just like you probably know in real life. First and foremost, the fact that Fred was arrested for what was supposed to be like $70 worth of ice cream was really the charge that was brought up on him, and he was actually an arresting offense. And so he was put in jail, and the Panthers had to kind of move on in his absence. He would write letters to them, just like we know in real life. But it was a moment in which things were kind of put on hold, where they were trying to figure some sort of leadership and what would transpire until his return, because they knew at one time he was coming home, one time or another. But there was a shootout which really happened historically, in the Black Panthers headquarters or their office, in which in real life, no one was actually killed, but several members of the police as well as the Panthers were injured. After the smoke settled, the police officers firebombed the office. And it was messed up because of the way that Fred had to find out, I won't mention it, but how he had to find out everything that was happening on the outside. It was such a big scene when the community started to come and help out with rebuilding. And they finally got the place looking, in my opinion, maybe even better than it did before. And when Fred was finally released from prison, he came home. And when the door opened, he expected to see things just, in a rubble, and probably have to slowly but surely begin to pick up the pieces. But to open the door and see things look the way that they did, I could see Daniel Kaluuya's just that emotion that he brought to Chairman Fred. And I can imagine how it really was for Fred with seeing how everyone had come together. And it was almost bringing him to tears. And then there's a scene where the rest of the Panthers come in from being outside and everything, and they all share, a big hug and all. And it was one of the most powerful scenes, I think, in the film. How did you feel about that homecoming for Chairman Fred?
It was good. I guess the film kind of took me along with it, so I was waiting for him to come home too, because so that was I thought it was very, very good. It's very effective. There are two things that I do want to mention though.
Yes,
two scenes that actually I appreciate how the director did not dumb things down or try to hold our hands for two what I thought were pivotal scenes. One in the very beginning, when Bill O'Neill he's arrested, and the only thing that the agent tells him is that you're looking at 5 years or you can go home. And the film does not show us, doesn't even sit around waiting for them to explain that. But we know through context that he agrees to become an undercover agent. It's just the next thing he's doing it.
Yes.
So
and he's in the classroom.
Yeah, in the classroom. And you know through context that that the agent must have said something. And you pick it up very, very soon, if not already. Because I mean, people can figure it out, but I just appreciate that the film didn't hold our hands with that moment to explicitly say that, oh, we want you to infiltrate the Black Panther Party, get close to Fred Hampton. Although they did talk about that, they jumped right to him getting down to it, and I appreciate that the film got right to it instead of waiting for us to pick it up. Just assumed that we were going to, and I'm sure most people, probably everybody has, and I just appreciate that because some films hold you by the hand.
Yeah.
This one didn't, and I appreciate it. There's another scene towards the end, and I'm not going to fully spoil it, but it does tie into, I think. Well, I saw parallels in like the title of the movie, Judas and the Black Messiah. It's the moment that Bill O'Neill chooses to betray Fred Hampton. Yes. And I saw parallels in that with the way that Judas betrayed Jesus.
Yes. Judas
betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And in this one, he betrayed him with a drink.
Right.
It just made me think of that.
Yes.
And even in that scene, they didn't spell everything out exactly the mechanism, because we knew from previous scenes what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And so he brings it up, and we just assume through context that it happened because later on that's when the raid happens. So I appreciate again that the film did not choose to hold us by the hand, that it trusted us to pick up what was laid down earlier and then put it together in context with what was said. And so then getting right to the important part versus, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? I'm glad that did not happen here.
And the panic that you felt rise up in you, although you knew that the fate of Fred was imminent. There was nothing to stop it because in real life the things that occurred. As the film is getting towards that ending, I'm feeling a sense of urge. You know, I'm feeling something unsettling, like in the pit of my stomach. And that's great storytelling, to have a moment in history that already happened. And now I'm going to tell you it. But as it's drawing near, you're actually feeling, oh, I don't want this to happen. Please let something interrupt it. And just as you said, Bill O'Neill, Wild Bill, goes right up to the moment that this act can take place, and then the film cuts to him walking out of the house. And there you're left to say, and me just putting hope up, did he really do it? Did, you know, what's going on? And then as things unfold, you find out how it all played. I'm talking about genius. One more thing is that speech, I am a revolutionary. There was the scene, as we said, in One Night in Miami, where Leslie Odom is portraying Sam Cooke, and he has that scene where the mics and all the sound, machinery goes out, and now he gets the crowd to kind of stomp their feet and make the music for him, and it just swells you up with this emotion. Well, it was the same way for me with Chairman Fred's speech of I am a revolutionary, when he asked the people over the side to bring in the drums, just like I would imagine they used to, in Africa, and when it's a chant or a call for action. And this was right after, as I said before, Winters had been killed. And so it was a turning point, because although Fred felt one way, he wasn't doing the best job of relaying it. And he was kind of in some way calling to arms people to pay some revenge to the people who took his dear comrade's life. When in actuality, as you find later on, and not to spoil, he maybe didn't really mean it in that way. But the way that that speech hit, and the way that he's pounding on the not the pulpit, but where he's standing, and the way that the audience is reacting, and this is right before you see the FBI agent has snuck in to just keep an eye on Bill O'Neill. But that seemed like it was such a pivotal part in the film, because it seemed like Fred had ascended as high as he could, at least in the 2 hours and 5 minutes of this movie. And so you saw that beautiful rise from when you first met him to this moment, where when you looked out in the sea of people, it was all colors, all genders, all ages, and it was just such a beautiful, beautiful scene. However, just like with any film, the movie isn't flawless. And one thing with me was there were a couple of characters that I wish could have been fleshed out a bit more. One in particular is the actor's name is Daryl Britt Gibson, and he portrayed Bobby Rush. This is a young guy with the afro, light-skinned cat, kind of thin, who anytime you saw anything going on, he was either in the middle of it, or he was standing in front of it, or he had something to do with it. But there were a lot of scenes that he may have been either pushed to the back, or maybe he just didn't have that many speaking lines for. And so there's him, and there's a couple of other people. There was one sister who, when they were in Fred's house at the end, she was, I believe, like sitting on the couch or on the bed, and she's now talking about how Fred needs to flee the country before he's arrested again. Well, not arrested, but sent back to prison for his crime that he was temporary release for. And so she, just like everybody, that I'm mentioning now, only had a little moment in which she just had a line or two. Although I felt her totally, it's like, I really want to know who that woman was in real life. So, I kind of felt, a little bit like I wish that could have been added a little more. Again, just a minor thing, but did you feel there was anything that could have been expounded on, or anything that you would have changed?
I agree with you that there were several characters that were very interesting, but we spent very little time on. That would have been nice to see a little more of them. But I think I've already mentioned my main issue was actually with Jesse Plemons. That I think he was going for understated, but I don't know. It was he was not very expressive like at all. But maybe that was on purpose. But it kind of I think was too much of a contrast with everyone else. And it may just be that he wasn't supposed to be very expressive. But I kind of found that I've seen him like that in another movie. But I've seen him in another movie where he was. So it was a little off for me, just that. But it may be that the character called for that. So who knows? His character had mentioned that he had seen some stuff, that he had been through some takedowns before. So maybe it may have been a world weariness that I thought was like inexpressive, but it may just be world weary. Which, if that's the case, then that's fine. But everything else, I liked a lot about it. There were some minor characters I wanted to see a little bit more of, and that's about it.
One more question. What percent of the film do you think was lent towards Bill O'Neill, and what percent of it was lent towards Chairman Fred?
I think that this was more about Bill O'Neill than Fred Hampton. I feel like you're going to ratio like maybe 60-40. Something like that, 75-25, something like that. Like I said, I mean, the central conflict, I really think is within Bill O'Neill. So I really appreciated how Lakeith Stanfield portrayed that on his face and in his mannerisms. So yeah, it seemed like a little more about Judas than the Black Messiah. But I think Stanfield's portrayal really worked for that.
I agree, and I think in keeping Fred in some ways a bit more mysterious would lend the audience to go and seek out his interviews and his speeches in real life. So in that regard, I'm hoping that it kind of sowed the seed to go down the rabbit hole and realize who the Black Panthers were, not only as a whole, but in their separate components. I really appreciated the 60-40, as you said before, because anybody else would have probably told everything just as a straight biopic. And we've seen that a million times. But out of everyone in the film, Lakeith had the most weight because what do you decide? Because he's in some ways a child, because he's fighting for his own freedom, just as they're fighting for theirs, just in a different regard. Because he has an FBI agent who's feeding him and bringing him to his house and making him feel comfortable, buying him clothes, giving him money, giving him a car to drive. And when it finally comes down to it, pulls the rug from under him because Hoover is leaning on him to say, hey, look, we need to get Fred taken care of. And I don't mean in jail, I mean for real taken care of. And so now Lakeith has to figure out, or Bill has to figure, how am I going to play this? And so I could see him being dangled on a string, and I really appreciated that. To go into the rating, and real quick, Rotten Tomatoes has given this film so far 96, which I'm hoping that it stays up there because it's really, really groundbreaking filmmaking, and coming from a directorial debut of Shaka King. So I'm expecting to see a lot more from this young man. He really did his thing. As far as acting, I believe that was the largest of our 5 ingredients. Directing, as I said before, if he's already this far, I can only imagine what he will be doing at the with the pinnacle of his work and later on down the line of his career. The screenplay I thought was good. I thought that, as we said before, there are a couple of things that could have either been stretched out a bit more, or a couple of things that could have been delved into a bit more. But rewatchability, I've seen the film 2 times already. and I'm definitely going to be purchasing it when it finally is released on Blu-ray. If there was a fifth ingredient, I would say that it is the need to know information. There was a lot of this stuff that I didn't know about Chairman Fred. There was certainly a lot I believe everybody didn't know about Bill O'Neill. And so now this is making me want to go and check out those other pieces of, literature and the other forms of media that have everything that they have about all that existed before this and all that came after it. I'm going to say that, in my opinion, you need to see this film. This is a film that you should show your sons and daughters, your grandchildren, people that you may know. Tell them about it, and I'm sure this is going to be riding on this wave for a long time now. I'm considering it to be highly recommended. I'm thinking that it's something that you will gain a better understanding of. You would get better insight and better information from, and it will help not only yourself and not only your take on what the Panthers were all about, but the fact of us having and needing, in this time in particular, real leaders like Chairman Fred was. How do you feel about the film as a whole, and what would you rate it?
As I said, I love the acting. Apart from Jesse Clemens, that's the only one. That's the only acting that didn't really work for me. But everything else was fine. The script was believable. I liked the plot. I appreciated the focus on Bill O'Neill, because it was definitely his story, and how he just showed all that he was going through, even sometimes without saying anything. I feel it is highly rewatchable. I also want to know more, especially about Bill O'Neill, and also his activism after the death of Fred Hampton, because they talked about that he stayed with the Black Panthers. And so I want to know about that. The last ingredient that I appreciated was the music.
Certainly.
That scene you mentioned, the speech, the Fred Hampton speech, when the drums came in, that really kept that moment moving. It made it seem active and exciting, with those drums, kind of an undercurrent to what Fred Hampton was saying. And there are moments like that throughout the film, so I appreciate that as well. So all told, I liked it a lot, and I wouldn't mind seeing it again.
I got you. At the end of the film is a song by her called "Fight for You," and it was almost as spellbinding as the song at the end of "One Night in Miami" by Leslie Odom Jr. All in all, this was an extremely important and gratifying endeavor. And I'm sure it's going to be talked about and watched again and researched. And as I said before, hopefully handed down to future generations. I challenge you all at home to do a bit of homework if you haven't already. And that would be, there's an album coming out that is like inspired off of this. And it goes by the same name, Judas and the Black Messiah. There's hip hop, there's soul, there's inspirational, some of everything. And I was listening to it a bit before we started to record this. It's all that. It's all that. Also, there are some in-depth discussions on HBOMAX that are almost like extras that you would find like if you had purchased the film. So I think it's maybe about 4 or 5 of them. Each one is about half an hour or so. So it's a lot of information, a lot of food for thought. Once again, watch the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. If you get a chance, watch Panther, which is a 1995 Mario Van Peebles film, and watch Eyes on the Prize. Look up the speeches by Chairman Fred, and of course follow the calls of Fred Hampton Jr. And the Cubs. They're doing big things. They're doing the feeding the children again. They're opening free clinics everywhere. They're bringing new just waves of people to what the cause is and what it has become. And I'm sure that it's going to be doing a lot of things, in time to come. And one last thing is, whenever the film drops, cop that thing on DVD or on Blu-ray, because I'm sure it's going to really hit hard to have right in your library. And that's pretty much it. Keep it locked on us, because next we are going to tackle the fact that Chadwick Boseman is going to be up for 2 posthumous Oscars coming up. One is on The Five Bloods, and the other is on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. We saw that it's going to tackle both of those films and let you know what we felt about that. So it's going to be a good time. So everybody stay tuned, stay locked, and stay committed. We'll see you soon.
See you next time.